Good afternoon, sir. This is Group 6 presenting on the process of compulsory acquisition in Guyana. Presentation will be done in the following order. Myself, Kiona Brown, Chapter 1, Ms. Keisha Nelson, Chapter 2 and 3, Mr. Ian Garnett, Chapters 4 and 5, Mr. Roshan Wayne, Chapters 6 and 7. Sustainable development requires government to provide public facilities and infrastructure that ensures safety and security, health and welfare, social and economic enhancement, and protection and restoration of the natural environment. An early step in the process of providing such facilities and infrastructure is the acquisition of appropriate land. In some cases, several locations could be suitable for a facility such as a new government office, for which the government may be able to purchase land at one of the locations through the land market. The power discussed in this paper as compulsory acquisition of land is also referred to as expropriation, eminent domain, compulsory purchase, land acquisition and resumption. The compulsory acquisition of land has always been a delicate issue and is increasingly so nowadays in the context of rapid growth and changes in land use. Governments are under increasing pressure to deliver public services in the face of an already high and growing demand for land. This paper sets out to trace the process applicable to compulsory acquisition in Guyana, the various maneuvers made by the relevant authorities against the citizens, property owners, with interest mainly focused on the National Sanatorium, also referred to as the COVID-19 Specialty Hospital. What is compulsory acquisition? Compulsory acquisition is the power of government to acquire private rights in land without the willing consent of its owner or occupant in order to benefit the society. Compulsory acquisition requires finding the balance between the public need for land on one hand and the provision of land tenure, security, private property rights on the other hand. Compulsory acquisition is inherently disruptive, even when compensation is generous and procedures are generally fair and efficient. The process of compulsory acquisition. In general, a well-designed compulsory acquisition process for a development project should include the following steps. 1. Planning. Government's decision to acquire land and for what purpose. Publicity. Government's notification to the general public, legally via the official gazette or any other source of media. Valuation and submission of claims. This is the appraisal of the value of the property by both government and owner. Payment and compensation. Government compensation to owner, either by cash or reallocation. Possession. Government's occupation and control of the property in completion of the above-mentioned processes. Appeals. This is the owner's right to challenge in court if not satisfied with compensation. And final process, restitution. Government's action only if appeal is successful.
Legislation, legal framework, and valuation methods. In Guyana, compulsory acquisition is governed by the following three legislations, which set out the principles and procedures relevant to compulsory acquisition of property in Guyana. Acquisition of Land for Public Purposes Act, Chapter 6205, which came into legislation on the 17th of December 1940. This act is arranged in 30 sections, ranging from the short title, Section 1, which describes the act and its objectives to facilitate the acquisition of land for public purposes, to Section 30, which sets out the rules for the protection of persons acting under this act. Acquisition of Land Settlement Act, Chapter 6206. This act came into legislation on 25th of May 1959 and is arranged in 10 sections which make provisions for acquisition of land to be used for the purpose of land settlement and acquisition of land not beneficially occupied, Act number 12 of 1984, which came into legislation in the year 1984 and is arranged in 14 sections, ranging from Section 1, being the short title, to Section 14. This act sets out the rules for land that are beneficially occupied and not state or government to be acquired, so as to maximize the use of such land in a meaningful way deemed by the government. The Valuation Division was created by an Act of Parliament in the year 1959 to make provisions for the valuation of property for rating purposes and for matters connected therewith. In addition, in accordance to Section 2804, the Valuation Division is the department of the Ministry of Finance with many branches for statutory regulations such as valuation for purchase or transfer, valuation for tax purposes, and valuation for compulsory acquisition or compulsory purpose, which occurs when an individual or organization declares itself bankrupt or the government is in need of acquiring a property for a public purpose. An appraisal of the property is done in order to facilitate compulsory acquisition of that property. We wish to note at this point that Guyana does not have any form of a proper legal standing nor real estate market index, and therefore it is not known how the valuers for their opinions as to the value of property in Guyana. The administrative framework. This diagram details all the relevant agencies and their roles in carrying out the acquisition process and ensuring that it is conducted in accordance with the laws of the country. The government of Guyana, through the Ministry of Legal Affairs, identifies the lot or lots to be acquired for the public purpose. The Attorney General instructs the Commissioner and or his agent to conduct a survey and provide a report. The report, together with the plan, is submitted to the Minister, who submits this to Parliament, and an order is made. The Ministry of Finance, through its Valuation Division, is responsible for valuing the lot or lots and conducting negotiations for compensation. Finally, the order is submitted to the Deeds and Land Registry to be registered as a deed in the name of the state.
As stated before by the other group members, the group, besides discussing the acquisition process of Guyana, had to choose a case study of acquisition of land for public purpose in Guyana. For this reason, the group chose acquisition of land for a national sanatorium at block lettered A Liliendal, situated in the city of Georgetown. A background into this acquisition would show that the then government of Guyana, a partner for national unity, embarked on this project because of the pandemic. So because of the COVID pandemic and our hospitals being where they were located in the center of Georgetown and the main hospital, they decided to find somewhere that was outskirts where they can hold patients of the pandemic just in case of the pandemic being so large that it went to a stage of desperation. So in such, the area was selected as from Turkine, known as Patterson, on the outskirts of the city of Georgetown, Guyana. This property is held by Mr. George Lord on the transport number 96 of 1990 and was depicted on plan number 23200 by Sworn Surveyor L.G. Arokium. This plan was dated August 31st, 1990. Here in picture is a brief depiction of that plan number 23200, where we have the surveyor's signature, the date of the survey, the memorandum which give the notes about how the survey was conducted and the reason and the owner of the area. Also, the diagram shows how the area has been bounded along with the distances and bearing of the property. However, we will go to how the property is bounded as follows. On the north, by the seawalls protecting the Atlantic Ocean from coming in. On the south, by the northern carriageway of the Rupert Craig Highway that leads from the east coast to Georgetown. On the east, by a road, and on the west, by another road. As noted, the area on this plan is 4.673 acres, which is of significance because land size allows for, when the value is done, for the compensation that will be paid. Next up, this is the process the government of Guyana followed. Through the Ministry of Legal Affairs and the Attorney General's office, the consultation was done with the government, other stakeholders, and the owner of the land. At the completion of this consultation, there was the decision completed to acquire this property because of its location and where it was. And in so doing, upon reaching the order, reaching the decision, the government then published an order in the official gazette. This was done on April 29th, 2020, and the order was numbered 59 of 2020. In this order, it set out the purpose of the acquisition and the authority to the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission and any other relevant agent to enter in the ground to do the preliminary works in terms of surveying, sightseeing, engineering studies, so on to allow for the acquisition of this land. From the surveying prospect of it, the description of the land to be acquired would have been made known, and the survey was necessary since the property was surveyed way back in 1991 and the acquisition was being done in 2020. So the government had to make sure and ensure that what they were going to compensate was exactly what was there on the ground. Hence, a surveyor was identified from the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission, who was the authority in giving the permission in the order to retrace the boundaries of the survey done by Mr. Rokia. The surveyor was appointed. In this case, the surveyor appointed was Mr. Ian Charles Garnett, yours truly. After completion of the survey, a plan was prepared by myself in order to show the findings, and this plan was numbered 74519 and it was dated May 4, 2020. Here is a copy of the order number 59 of 2020, and as we can see, there is the date of the order in the official gazette. There is also the order number, and it's made under the Act, Acquisition of Land for Public Purpose, Chapter 6205. It states out the powers that the minister had and who he divulged his powers to. First, the description of what is to be done. Secondly, there is the instructions granted to the Commissioner of Lands together with his agents, servants, to enter on the land to do whatever surveys and whatever that needs to be done. And there's a schedule of the property describing the property is located. Here is the plan 74519 done by Mr. Garnett, and it shows the area similar to Mr. Arokiam. However, in line 7 of the memorandum is where the changes and the differences were found, which resulted in the acreage being less than was quoted on Mr. Arokiam's plan. This was due to errors in some distances in Arokiam plan, quoted on his plan and in his computations. Then these differences were relevantly noted because of these differences, as we know, valuation often goes with the cost, and based on that, the evaluation of the size, and based on that, the acreage of the land would have come down from being high. So with this completed, the government then issued a letter to the chief valuation officer for the preparation of the valuation for the property. The documents and everything completed from that stage was then handed over to the Attorney General. Application was then made to the Registrar of Deeds in order to register the property in the name of the government, and based on what the value was, compensation was also ordered to the owner of the property, to the Minister of Finance.
Recommendations and advice to Guyana to ensure that equitable and efficient acquisition of land is conducted when needed for development. Laws should be written with precision to establish the government's authority to compulsory obtain land. It should also ensure that people know their rights throughout the process. Poor laws and regulations that govern the acquisition of land may erode public confidence in the rule of law and increase project costs. In the planning stage, an impact assessment should be conducted to evaluate various facets of the project. Notice of the acquisition should be made more easily accessible to the public through means of newspapers, gazettes, magazines, etc. Typically in Guyana, we only publish notice of an acquisition in the National Gazetteer, which is not regularly accessed by the mass public. Those affected by the acquisition should be given funds and opportunities equal to or greater than what was taken. Parties involved should be given reasonable time to vacate the property, but possession should not be taken until a majority of the amount of due compensation is paid. Affected parties should be given the opportunity to make an appeal, and governments should enable the citizens to protect their rights as landowners. Overall, our recommendation is for the process to be easily accessible for the public, for them to be able to understand and follow along with the process as it continues to move forward. Chapter 7, our conclusion. In conclusion, based on research, it was discovered that Guyana has all the legal framework, legislation, and procedures laid out within the laws and constitution. However, due to the political nature of the country, as shown in our case study, these are not always followed to the letter. Therefore, as set out in our recommendations, strict guidance must be given to the adherence of the country's laws and guidelines along with those set out in the FAO International Standards and Guidelines for Compulsory Acquisition. Clearly, following these guidelines and standards, despite of the no confidence motion and subsequent change of administration, would not have resulted in a citizen being deprived of his compensation for a property, now being utilized to its fullest capacity. However, had the proprietor been compensated adequately, the title registered in the name of the state, then the compulsory acquisition process would have been termed a successful one. Sadly, this was not the case. The state has occupation and continued use of the property, while the proprietor is left empty-handed, which was never the intentions of the laws of Guyana, its constitution, and certainly not that of the international standards set out in the FAO guidelines. Thank you.